Hi, everyone. Sorry if it's been a long time. Um, to be utterly frank with you, the last couple of months have been a mixed bag. In fact, put it bluntly, this year sucked. I haven't been as, like, to an extent, I still have been active. I've been trying to do stuff, writing stuff, more than just movies. I've tried doing writing at, like, you're gonna laugh at this, crap like fan fiction and shit. And also been playing a lot of video games. Typically, like, had we had like had none of this stuff happened, I would have probably gotten the method of like doing a video probably almost every month. But because of the COVID stuff and the current turmoil that's just consuming what feels like the entire world as of late, it's been hard for me. It really has. I know that hasn't stopped other people from continuing doing what they do, and shouldn't me either. Probably got hit with lazy virus or something. I don't know. I'm gonna try and do better. I just hope things turn out better. Thankfully, this month, it's a good month. It's October. And usually around October, I always love to watch horror films, regardless of whether they're new, old, etc., yada yada. Doesn't matter. So long as it entertains me, scares me, engages me on some kind of level, I don't care. And this month I decided to actually dress up as a horror film character from one of my favorite horror films. I would even go so far as to say one of my favorite films from the 2010s, The House that Jack Built. Yep, I'm Jack. See, I even have a Blu-ray copy of the film right here. Let's see. Uh, I know it's not exactly a one-to-one outfit, but damn glare in the way. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I know it exactly isn't a one-to-one outfit, but this was something that was just kind of thrown together at the last minute. It didn't look exactly like this last week. I mean, not last week, on Saturday when I went to well, technically it was last week, but anyway. Uh, it wasn't the same exact looking costume. It was a little bit different, but like the tie was here, and I did have a button up shirt, but not this one. I didn't have this. I had this jacket. I have these pants on. Yes, I am wearing pants. And these glasses, which were given to me by Barbara. Um, I've really enjoyed this outfit, and I do really love this character from this film. He's by far one of my favorite film characters of past couple of years. Um, but today, what I wanted to talk about was my love of the horror genre. How much it is a genre that, regardless of what particular medium it's in, books, TV, movies, video games, what have you, it is always a genre that is just. There's almost room for just boundless creativity in the genre. You see tons of directors get their big start with horror films, or like what their breakout film is, and just the kind of things they're able to accomplish. Like Roman Polanski, one of his biggest breakout hits was Rosemary's Baby, which came out in 1968 with Mia Farrow. Or how Jordan Peele, just a couple of years back in 2017, when he did Get Out, not only was that a major box office sensation, it was the most critically acclaimed film that year and scooped him up an Oscar, which has just kind of opened up the floodgates for him to do all sorts of stuff. You have other directors like Robert Eggers and Ari Aster who hit the ground running with films like The Witch and Hereditary, and their follow ups proved to show that they were no slouches either, with films like Midsummer and The Lighthouse. And it's not just horror as a genre that can be just defined as one thing. You can do interesting things with it. There isn't just straight horror. There's horror dramas, there's horror comedies, there's action horror films. There's, the integration. There's the whole debate of like, is it a thriller, is it a horror, etc., etc. Something like a film like Seven, for example, which to some extent is still sort of debated on whether or not it's a horror movie or if it's just a thriller. For my personal opinion, I view it definitely as a horror film because of the imagery, of the visuals it has on display. Just that film has such an oppressive atmosphere to it. The ending, like just the look of the movie alone just kind of makes you feel like, ugh, I feel gross watching this. To say nothing of the actual film itself. And of course the infamous ending. What's in that box? Um, and there's just so much to the genre. Lately, like this even, like one of the things I've been doing is like I've been trying to find the right horror game to play lately. I tried going back to Condemned Criminal Origins, but that proved to be a little bit too scary for myself. And Soma, I just kind of got too far into it, and then when I got back to it, I really didn't know what the hell to do. So I decided to get a copy of Resident Evil 7 on Steam. Actually, I bought it from somewhere else, but it was cheap, so. And playing that has been pretty fun so far, seeing as how it's basically a video game version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but what if Leatherface and his family were super mutants? Which is just the darndest thing. um, but what I also wanted to talk about was the kind of horror films I'm planning on watching this month, the ones I already have gone through, and some ones I want to see if I can try and squeeze in before the month ends. I would have watched more, but there were circumstances that were kind of holding it up. And on top of that, I'm going to sound bizarre by saying this, but I'm like a weird purist. Like, I could have watched any one of these on my phone, but I preferred not to. I preferred to watch them, like, on a regular TV screen. If I have a physical copy of it, I want to go for it. And if it's on Netflix, I still want to see it on a TV screen. That doesn't mean I can't watch stuff on my phone. I can, but I would prefer the proper viewing experience for it. You can accuse me of sounding like a pretentious snob, but, well, actually, you can't accuse me of being a pretentious snob because technically I am dressed up as one. Though, thankfully, I do not make verbose soliloquies about how beautiful my art is, and by art, I mean murders. Anyway, so I'm just going to go and place this to the side. Alright. Here's the little stack of films that I've been... Oh, yes. See? Ta-da! Pretty neat, huh? Yeah. Alright. So anyway, here's the little stack of films I've been watching over the past couple of days. Some of these I haven't quite gotten to yet, and some of the other ones that I'm going to talk about I don't even have copies of. So I want to get those out of the way just to kind of quickly, because not as bulky. One of the movies I rewatched was Sinister. I actually do have a copy of that, but I watched it on TV. Still as effective as always. The lawnmower scene alone is just one of those scenes where you're just like, ah. That one is about Ethan Hawke playing like a true crime novelist who discovers some spooky home movies up in his attic at the new house that him and his family move into, and they're not the fun kind of home movies. They're of horrifying murders being done, being done by two families, and apparently a demon is behind them. Great horror film. Another film that was in the repertoire was Gerald's Game, co-written, directed by Mike Flanagan. My apologies, based off the Stephen King novel about a vacation gone bad when a couple decides to, go out for, leave the town for the weekend and indulge in some bondage, only for the husband to die of a heart attack and for her to try and escape while handcuffed. It's brilliant. Up until the last 10 minutes, it's completely sucked. God, but then again, it is based off of a Stephen King novel, so that kind of comes with the territory. Everything beforehand is brilliant! Except the ending, which blows. Good Lord, King even acknowledged that in his cameo in It Chapter 2. I think even if you asked the guy in person, he would just be like, yeah, my endings suck. So, hey, at least he's got humility there. And another film that was on, I watched Upgrade. That one's kind of more sci-fi action, but there is that tinge of horror in it because it was written, directed by the guy who helped write the Saw and Insidious movies. So on some level, those films definitely count. So on that level, Upgrade definitely does count as a horror film, especially when you get to the ending of that film. But that still just works as a great cybernetic Death Wish riff with Logan Marshall Green doing a great, it's like physical and a surprisingly emotional performance. It's been on FX a lot lately, so I suggest you give that one a shot. That's a really fun one. And lastly, the one that I also watched, I actually just watched it this morning. I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Charlie Kaufman, which is probably the least horror-ish out of all the films I've got here and elsewhere. But it was definitely a film that intrigued me. What that one is about is that it's about a woman who goes to meet up with her boyfriend's family for, just the weekend, for the night to have like a little conversation, dinner, etc., etc. And then strange things begin to happen. It's a very existentialist film. I wouldn't exactly call it a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but it was definitely one that after it was over, I was like, well, I definitely got the appeal of that one. I still am not a full blown fan of Charlie Kaufman. I don't think I ever will be. I mean, he's done stuff I like, but yeah, maybe he's just not entirely for me. I'm not sure. But what I did see with this one, and its little tinges of horror and atmosphere, it definitely intrigued me. I definitely wanted to keep on watching it to the end, even as utterly bizarre as it gets in the second half. Um, but anyway, there's also one last film I still need to get through. There's even a few more that I still have sitting on the table. I'm planning on rewatching In Fabric with my mom, and I rented something from Amazon called Relic. Um, I'll hopefully get some time enough to sit down and watch Relic sometime. Not to be confused with The Relic from the 90s. No, Relic. This is an Australian horror film that just came out this year, so I'll make sure to sit down and watch that. But anyway, on to the physical copies of stuff I have for horror films I've watched lately. Overlord. This was actually the one I used to kick off the spooky month season. This movie's awesome. It's just straight up a World War II action horror riff where squad lands over D-Day and they go to blow up a radio tower only to discover that the radio tower's got super soldiers in it. And that's it. That's the movie. You get about good 2 hours of Nazis' heads exploding and shit. I had a blast when I saw this back in the theater, and it just always manages to be consistently entertaining for me. It's just one of those films where it just works just on the premise alone. You want action, you like horror, you like watching Nazis' heads explode? Sure, bingo. Problem solved. There's a movie. Right there. Have fun. I know I do. One of the ones I watched after that was Exorcist 3. Oh, wait. Forgot to point this out, but both these came from the same label. But Exorcist 3, I know a lot of people consider the original Exorcist, to be a stone cold classic, but for my taste, I mean, I love The Exorcist, I really do, but something about Exorcist 3 has always appealed to me more, just because I think it's a straight up scarier movie. Something about Blatty's touch, like in comparison to Friedkin's relatively cold and yet oddly sympathetic approach to it, or John Borman's whatever the hell he was doing with Exorcist 2, dear God, that movie. This one feels both in line with the original, but also completely different. One of the reasons why Exorcist 3 always works for me so well is how it manages to juggle tone, because I can legitimately say Exorcist 3 is not only one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, it's one of the funniest. The movie is loaded with scenes that just make me laugh. Genuinely funny scenes. One of the best scenes that happens early on in the movie is when the two main characters, let's see, Lieutenant Kinderman and his priest buddy. Kinderman's played by George C. Scott in a great role, which It's kind of surprising because apparently he did not get along well with William Peter Blatty on set. But there's this great scene where the two of them go to see It's a Wonderful Life at a screening, and after they come out of the screening, George C. Scott goes on this hysterical rant about his body odor, why he smells right now. And it's all because of this fish that's been sitting in the bathtub for the past couple of weeks in the household because his mother-in-law wants to preserve it and kill it a certain way. And the camera's just slowly zooming in on this. And as we're seeing his priest friend, who's played by Ed Flanders, we're just seeing him just struggling to hold back hysterical laughter as George C. Scott's just like darting at him, and like his eyes are going kind of crazy in that scene. How he's just kind of like, smell that, Father? That's right. I haven't bathed for 2 weeks. And if I see that fish one more time, I'm going to kill it. You understand? That scene almost kind of encapsulates what I love about Exorcist 3 is that it's a genuinely funny movie. Now, don't get me wrong, the movie is absolutely terrifying. One of the most infamous scenes from the film comes from a jump scare that happens about I would say like around the 90-minute mark, where a figure in a hooded sheet comes out of nowhere with these large pincers that can crush bone, and the person comes out of nowhere, and we see what looks like him clopping off a nurse's head, but you don't actually see it, and that is one of the reasons why Exorcist 3 is scary. It describes so many different kinds of utterly horrifying, brutal things, but we never actually see them. It's all left to your imagination, and the descriptions that the characters go on is just some of the most just like you listen to it and you're just like ugh, ugh. At least for me anyway. I could go on and on with how much I love Exorcist 3. I would probably have to devote a whole video to do that, but as I said, I cannot recommend Exorcist 3 enough. If you haven't seen it, go for it. If you can somehow still find a copy of the special edition 2-disc Blu-ray, I highly recommend it. It comes with both cuts, both theatrical and director's. I've never actually properly sat down and watched the director's cut. I heard it's an interesting version. Like, to me, the theatrical always had a great engine behind it, but that's just me. Next up, this is actually my mom's disc. I bought this for her for Christmas last year, and she allowed me to put it on. The original Hellraiser, an edition courtesy of Arrow Video. This movie's freaking great. I love the costume design. I love the makeup effects. I love so many things about this movie. This is one of the all-time great horror films. It's always been a favorite to watch around Halloween. Uh, oh man, I need to just try and do my Pinhead impression. Like, the box. You opened it. We came. Now you must come with us. Taste our pleasures. It sucks that what's his name? Clive Barker has never he never got around to making more movies. He only made 3 in his entire career. This, Nightbreed, and Lord of Illusions. I love all 3 of those movies. And there we go. I love all 3 of those films. They all display Barker's wonderful imagination, his terrifying aesthetic, his almost borderline erotic sensibility to body horror and sexuality. He finds beauty in the grotesque more than anyone else does. If someone were to establish a museum that is just loaded with nothing but either art inspired by the works of Clive Barker or actual paintings from him, I would spend all day in that goddamn thing just marveling at it. I really would. He has such a beautiful aesthetic. I'm still waiting for the day for Hellraiser to kind of get a proper resurrection on screen. Because I feel like it's time. Like, there have been so many horror reboots and remakes and etc., and I kind of feel like Hellraiser is due for another go. I would love it if somehow Barker had involvement in it, or if he just went ahead and decided to write and direct another movie, that I'd be okay with too. It seemed like for a while he was going to be like the next Stephen King, and then he just kind of went. Even though he still continually writes, he still comes up with interesting ideas and stories. I hope eventually we see him do something else someday, because he's a voice that needs more on-screen treatments. That's what I say. This one, this has kind of become like a new Halloween tradition ever since I saw it back in 2017. You can thank Jay Bauman of Red Letter Media for pointing me in this movie's direction, and I probably never would have, because I'm not much of a fan of the director. The Guest. This is an awesome movie. This is definitely one of those films where the less you know, the better. I'm serious. Like, do not, don't, like, just keep your lid tight when you pitch this movie to people. All you need to know is that it's about a handsome gentleman who comes to a family's house, and he used to be a fellow soldier with their family's kid. He died, and he wanted to pay his respects, and etc., etc. And then, for some strange reason, the moment he shows up into town, a trail of corpses starts showing up. And that's all I'm going to say. It's such a peculiar mix of action, horror, slasher movie, dark comedy, deconstruction, genre throwback, that I'm almost kind of baffled that Adam Wingard made it, because outside of this movie, I don't think Adam Wingard is a particularly good director. He's got a good taste in music and visual sensibilities, but everything else I've seen by him, I am not a fan of. I thought You're Next was overrated. Blair Witch was a missed opportunity, and Death Note was some of the most unintentionally hilarious bullshit I've ever seen. That Kong versus Godzilla thing he's going to be doing, I have no hopes for that thing, but at least I'll always have this piece of genius right here. Mwah. Also, Dan Stevens hot. This one I began watching a bit of with my mom. We still need to watch the rest of it. Dr. Sleep. I already did a video on this last year with my girlfriends. Great sequel to The Shining. Absolutely. Also directed by Mike Flanagan. Going back around. Just for the record, this version actually comes with two different versions. You've got the theatrical cut and the director's cut. As far as I'm concerned, the director's cut is the way to go. It's a subtle director's cut, despite the inclusion of it being a half hour longer. And I say subtle in the sense that you really don't notice the differences unless you're really kind of like squinting your eyes. There's more build-up in the director's cut than there is in the theatrical cut, which is saying something, because I remember from when I saw the theatrical cut, like, that movie spends a whole dedicated hour just to developing its characters and doing nothing more. Like, the actual plot doesn't kick in until after that point, and the director's cut does an elongated version of that, which I was okay with. It's a terrific horror epic. It's a shame that this bombed the way it did, but at the same time, I'm glad it exists. I never would have thought something this wonderful would ever come into my life. I never thought. Thank you, Mike Flanagan. Thank you, Stephen King. And to an extent, thank you, Stanley Kubrick. You three beautiful bastards. Here's a classic that I intend to watch the rest of the season. Trick or Treat. Little Sam is the most adorable thing ever. Yeah, I've always enjoyed this. It's a fun horror anthology. Great cast. Michael Dougherty, solid writer-director he is. I loved his work on this. Krampus wasn't half bad. I still haven't seen Godzilla King of Monsters, but from what I understand, that was bad. And he's a halfway decent writer, too. I mean, he did help write some of the X-Men movies, and what was another one he helped to do? He did another project that was really good. Crud. It'll come back to me eventually. Looking right here on the back of the cover. Bryan Singer's name's actually mentioned. That's a name you won't hear these days. But yeah, this is a fun horror anthology made up of all sorts of things. Dead children, werewolves, serial killers, vampires, you name it. It's out on Halloween night, and it's having fun. And hey, it's barely 80 minutes, so that's great. This is the regular Blu-ray that I have of it. I know Shout Factory put out their own edition of it, I think last year. It was either last year or 2018, I forget which year. I saw what that set looked like. It looked fantastic, but this has been a trusty disc in my collection for the longest time, so I really don't see the point in getting a new one. All right. This one's become a classic in my life. Cure for Wellness, directed by Gore Verbinski, Dane DeHaan, Mia Goth, Jason Isaacs. This massive, colossally excessive gothic horror epic set in the Swiss Alps, where a snooty little business executive tries to rescue his boss, only to get intertwined into some, like, only to become a patient of this beautiful retreat's escapades, and it's this utterly strange, excessive, gorgeous, gross movie. I remember at the time the reviews for it were bad. Like, it seemed like everybody I knew just absolutely hated this thing. But I had a few of my friends who did see it who thought, "Oh no, dude, this is awesome! Like, you got to see this. I have no idea what the hell it was, but this is great." So I didn't see it until it came out on video, like a few months later. I sat down and watched it, and within seconds, I was immediately pulled into the thing. I was like, "Oh my god, I know exactly what this is, and I'm going to love it." And I did. It never pulled my attention away for one single second. I'll admit that it's also a movie that is convoluted and just kind of goes on and on and on. But when you see a big Hollywood director like Gore Verbinski be given a shit ton of money and free reign to create something this deranged, sometimes you gotta take pleasure where you can find it. And this is definitely one of the most pleasurable horror films I have ever seen. I really need to watch this again. God damn it! Even talking about it just kind of sets my brain on fire. These last two were actually horror films that came out in kind of a big year. What I kind of consider to be one of the biggest years of horror. It's also the same year House that Jack Built came out in. Just curious. Oh, and Overlord 2. That should give you a hint. These next two, these are already considered classics of their own. I'm just gonna go over the least popular first. Mandy, another action horror one. This one's, it's still just like a wonderful, it's been a while since I've seen it. Last time I watched it was last year with my buddy Joey. He got laid off from work, so I brought him home. I brought him back to my place. We smoked some weed and watched this together for the evening. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember it being just like a badass action horror spectacle. It's weird how it's like the first half is this ultra slow moving drone core just thing going on, and then you get to the second half and it's full on gore-rific insanity, I would say. But also, something that I also liked about Mandy is that it is also genuinely a movie about grief and how a loved one can be taken away from you from terrible people, but that doesn't mean you can't fight back. And a lot of people do love to talk about how crazy Nicolas Cage's performance is in it. And don't get me wrong, you do get your fair share of crazy Cage, but there is genuine emotional depth to his performance. The freak out scene, which is kind of like considered one of the big moments of the film, where he goes into a bathroom after his lover's been killed. Yeah, it's one of those kind of movies, but there's a lot more artistic flair to it, where he goes into the bathroom and he finds a bottle of vodka and he just starts hysterically screaming. And it's one of those rages that bounces between grief to anger to grief to hysteria. It keeps on bouncing between those emotions all in that one scene, and it's all in one take. And it almost, like, if you notice the camera movements of that scene, it almost looks like the cameraman's a little bit afraid to be in there, because it's like, oh crap, is Cage actually going to kill me? Which reminds me, Benjamin Loeb's cinematography for this was just outstanding. Best looking movie that came out in 2018. That and Cold War. Yeah, those were the two best looking movies that came out that year. Yeah. Also, some other tips I want to give about watching this movie: watch it at night and get fucking baked as shit. Like, those are my main tips on that. Is the proper way to watch Mandy: at night and high. Do not watch this during the day. This is a movie that even during daytime scenes, it feels like it's set at night. Like, it just kind of, it's a weird thing to describe. You just kind of have to see it for yourself. It's on Shudder. I got this Blu-ray ages ago. I think you can actually get the Blu-ray for pretty cheap. Hell, our LJE Films just put out a steelbook of it not too long ago. If you want to get it, go for it. I definitely recommend it. Damn, I gotta watch this one again soon. Finally, there's still a bunch of other horror films. I've got stuff like The Witch and Scanners, 28 Days Later, Antichrist. I've got so many horror films up the yin yang. I've got a box set of the original Alien films. If I could bring up all the horror movies I had and plop them right down to just kind of talk about them, this would be an extremely long video. But I want to cap off this video with one of my most memorable theater going experiences. I've mentioned this film plenty of times. I'm still trying to get Barbara to watch it. I hope we can actually sit down and watch it sometime. Hereditary. I remember seeing the trailers for this when they premiered. You know, like, I saw the A24 logo, and I thought to myself, yeah, this will probably be okay, but God, these trailers are fucking awful. I hated how much they overly hyped it, how scary the film was, how much they went out of their way to just hype themselves up to the point in which it just felt obnoxious to watch. Like, I caught the trailer twice for 2 separate movies, and both times they annoyed me severely. But even with all the early festival praise and such, but when actual reviews from people who didn't come from festivals actually started to see it, I was getting this weird mojo feeling about it. Like, I was like, okay, all right, let's see where this goes. And then when I went in and saw it, after 2 hours had passed, I was in a state of catatonia. I was petrified after what I had seen, after the horrors that, at the time, first-time director Ari Aster decided to shove right in front of my face. How he was able to jerry-rig a drama about generational trauma and grief and combine and parental deceit and mental illness and combine it with basically a like, just like the most fucked up haunted house movie you could ever imagine is beyond me. And the fact that it actually works as well as it does is a testament to both his screenwriting skills and his directorial chops. That being said, if there was an issue I did have with Hereditary, is that I kind of feel like thematically it's a little inconsistent. Towards the end, it kind of feels like it throws out a lot of the stuff it had been building up to beforehand in favor of just kind of like unleashing just a nasty series of shocks. Granted, those shocks are massively impressive and scary and put me in a state of just absolute fear. This is where I kind of feel like Midsommar improved upon. Midsommar felt more thematically concrete than Hereditary did, but at the same time, it wasn't as scary and it wasn't as well written, because one of the things that Hereditary really does work well in is the characters. Everybody feels like an actual genuine person in it, that have lives that go beyond the actual film. And it's all because of the... Oh, what the... Oh, alright. Starting to run low on video here. But I'll have to talk about Hereditary another time. But yeah, I definitely need to watch this one again. I just remember being so scared by it. It's still a freaky ass movie. I hope Oster keeps on doing what he does best. I know apparently he's taking a break from the horror genre, which kind of sucks, but he's going to be replacing it with something he calls a 4-hour nightmare comedy, which, God. But anyway, once again, I'm sorry for such a long gap in the videos. Just this year hasn't been fun. I really hope things improve. I really do. It just hasn't been good. But, you know, it's always light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully it's a good light, not the one that ends up with all of us dead. Because that'd be bad. Anyway, adios, people.